The story of the Bougainville crisis has been told many times before, and certainly by more relevant people than myself. But we decided to start our journey here to recollect the history of the relationship between the European Union and Papua New Guinea. Because the concept of a modern Europe was also built on the ashes of a major conflict. And it was only in the years that followed that the idea of jointly sharing our natural resources brought peace in the continent for the first time in our history. A similar concept of solidarity was brought to Bougainville by the EU to rebuild a society that had been torn apart by nearly 10 years of civil war. What is left of the Panguna mine today is just a distant memory of what used to be one of the largest copper and gold mines in the world, where thousands of people were employed at the peak of production. The sound of the heavy machinery now is all gone, and so are the people. Apart from the few who perhaps never left this land. It is on the ashes of this socio-economic tragedy that we begin our journey across Papua New Guinea, starting of course from the land itself.
Conflict started in 1989, and at that time the farmers would sell to their cooperative societies, and that's how they used to generate money for the family. Because of the war, people were not safe anymore. They were told by the people to move beyond 8 kilometers because that was the range of the mortars that were being fired from the ship. They deserted their farms. They deserted their villages, they deserted their animals, everything, and they just move away.
People lost everything. Some of them lost their lives, even the relatives. So their houses were burned down by the PNC Defense Force or the BRA. My land was abandoned during the war.
The overall direction of the national government and the Prime Minister, Bill Skate, at the time, was to bring about peace and normalcy as a matter of urgency or as soon as we possibly can. Most of the donors were able to actually understand that and be able to put into the designs of their projects that as to how it would contribute and thereabout bring back a normal situation. Possibly easier said than done, but it needed people that went in with confidence and I suppose you put your heart in it. For me, it was no longer a paid job anymore. I went in there because I loved the people.
tens of millions were invested by the European Union into the cocoa research and development program. The industry was really producing about 0.2 tons per hectare of cocoa at that time. The productivity was extremely low. And so significant resources and efforts were needed in research to try and increase that low productivity.
Dr. John Moxon, who was the head of the Coconut Research Institute, they had just released some of the best cocoa clones as you came out of that crisis. The timing was almost almost perfect for that. So he was able to say, let's take the best clones to Bougainville.
The EU planting material is a hybrid and new technology, and they were fast growing.
Resistant to pests and diseases. Our record indicates that 15 to 20 million seeds were given out to the farmers throughout the region. Yes, it changed my life and also changed life of Bougainvilleans.
Some of these ethnic groups, opponents, those for the PNC government came down into the village, and the ones who lived in the centers came back together, rebuild their lives, like build their houses, make their new gardens. They conducted reconciliations among themselves. So when cocoa came in, binded everyone.
This is an example of a feeder road that the European Union rehabilitated. Because of the crisis, this was overgrown and accessibility was basically zero. On this particular stretch of road, this is about 20 kilometers, just around 300,000 kina. And we were not going to build highways. We were just rehabilitating them so that they have access to services. It is so important. Even today, Bougainville is still looking at feeder roads. Everywhere we go, the government goes, the people are asking for feeder roads.
Building roads is not at the center of the EU intervention in Papua New Guinea anymore. Even though millions of euros were spent in the past in rehabilitating roads all over the country, and not only in Bougainville. Social mobility, after all, is one of the core values of the European Union, as it is hard to imagine a brighter future unless we all find a way to be connected with each other.
Years ago, they had plenty of time to prepare for an eruption that didn't happen. This time they had an eruption very quickly and no time to really prepare.
The best comparison is actually the eruption of both Vulcan and Tverver in 1937. They both erupted at the same time, like we're having at the moment. I can only see about 20 meters away from the observatory. The whole town is covered in a thick blanket of grey ash that is being blown by the wind from both volcanoes towards us. So it is very difficult to actually see what is going on at the moment.
Hearing the volcanologist's voice today still provides a chilling experience, as he clearly wasn't aware of the full extent of the natural disaster that had just happened. During those dramatic days, the European Union, together with other international organizations, came to help Papua New Guinea, outside its official role as a development partner, but in humanitarian assistance instead.
The volcanic eruptions affected everyone from all walks of life, and there was a lot of foreign aid and assistance came in to help relocate people, which they did mainly for those impacted villages, to buy up a couple of old plantations, subdivide them, and allow people to resettle on those closer to Kokopo, away from the impact of those volcanic areas. So many of those people have never really gone back to those villages.
The EU was among the partners who reacted very swiftly after the eruption. Actually, I still remember that nobody was expecting the volcano to erupt. There was no prior indication that we will have such an eruption. So it came as a surprise to everyone. And in fact, there was devastation everywhere. The first response was through our humanitarian program, which was really to support short-term needs to the displaced population. But very soon we tried to mobilize resources for longer-term restoration and rehabilitation.
Because it's volcanic soil, it doesn't have much in the way of water retention, so it's quite difficult for those village people to get fresh water. So the European Union put bores and hand wells and things into a lot of those villages around the backside of the volcanoes. It was quite a big project that was going on in East New Britain just before the eruptions, and carried on for a little bit afterwards, because a lot of those water sources got damaged by volcanic ash going into them and became undrinkable.
It was really one of the most impactful operations we ever did in the country, and I'm very proud for that, because it was really the acute need of the displaced population. I think we prevented a lot of the diseases spreading at that time, and this was really one of the successful operations because we did it in a matter of days.
Changing the course of time, of course, is an impossibility. But one of the things that we have learned as we looked back into the history of this relationship is that international cooperation has a reason to exist in today's world. From economic development to political cooperation, the European Union and Papua New Guinea have embarked on a journey together to tackle some of the most pressing issues of our time. Not only in the past, but most importantly, into the future.
Only 40% of our population have access to safe water. This is one area where you can touch many lives when you have a country that has a lot of what we call waterborne diseases.
In Papua New Guinea, the wonderful thing is that the majority of people do have access to some water sources. The issue is, how can we make sure that they don't just use any water, but they have access to clean water, and they know how to purify it if needed, and then be able to use it.
Water is a source of life. If it's not managed properly, can also be a cause of frictions. And this is exactly what we try to do from the beginning, working with the local communities to define the boundaries, see the beneficiaries, make sure that everybody is on board before proceeding with a go decision on investment.
My own village benefited from a water supply system built by the European Union. We were able to pump water from a hill by gravity feed into a village, and it completely changed the lives of the people. This is one sector that I would like to see the European Union continue to invest in. We really appreciate what they've done.
Time mama mi plala water mol plant na kisimwara mi plasa go down the hill. Down blow through is taking 2 hours. Mi amma so sem through lo this la a project through lo funding belong European Union. Mel mi plala mama pikini on lapun. What I start last one and then go through.
Of course, all communities would like to have access to water, but we have to select those who are prepared to work for that. And this is a message we try to convey through all the programs, that they would need the engagement, because it's one of the factors that will guarantee success and that the project will work after it has been handed over.
One of the areas where EU provided the longest and one of its biggest inputs was in water supply and sanitation. It's easy to go and just come in and deliver a water supply project into a community and vanish. But to be sustainable, you have to have the demand, the local ownership, the commitment to managing its sustainability, whether it's through a community group or the local level government council, including when there were periods with El Nino-induced droughts. EU was really at the center stage there.
Of course, there is only so much that international partners can do to help lifting developing nations out of poverty, which is the ultimate goal of the European Union's intervention abroad. But why does the EU embark on this seemingly impossible task? I've asked this question to Rudy Filon, the head of political affairs at the European Union delegation in Port Moresby.
Let's say industrialized countries all engage on topics like development cooperation. And they all do that because they feel they have kind of a moral obligation in the world to help others to become as prosperous as they are themselves. And they feel that there is this idea of sharing and other countries to develop, and so that they become safer, they become cleaner, they become wealthier. And it takes away tension. It takes away tension about you are on the good side of things. Economically you develop well, and I'm in a poor country, so maybe I should come to your country.
Investing in people worldwide sounds like an intelligent and noble cause. But of course, the concept does face resistance back in Europe, as the continent gradually recovers from a crippling financial crisis that has left millions of people unemployed, especially among the young generations.
Although many things need to change, many things need to improve, but it still doesn't mean that we are in such dire straits that we are obliged to say, okay, we drop our external aid to countries that are way, way, way poorer than we are. We have to strike a balance. And one of the things that is very important in that respect is indeed the effectiveness of what we are doing in third countries.
European Union has invested 2.1 billion kina over the last 40 years in our country. Now, this to me is a very significant investment by all our donors. European Union only comes second to Australia in terms of development funding support. Now, what do they get in return from that is the key issue that I'm sure all the European Union member states will be asking.
There's a vested interest in the largest economy in the world to support a sustainable industry. Cocoa can't be produced in Europe. It's produced in the tropical areas, and so it's a partnership. And also, people really want to know that what they're eating is not at the expense of atrocities somewhere in that market chain, in injustices, in child labour, or people are being disadvantaged. In PNG, the children, they come back and they participate in the cocoa production on the farm after they've finished school. And we're always very careful to ensure that is the case.
Sustainability is an increasingly important factor as part of any partnership agreement nowadays. And luckily, that applies not only to the products imported into Europe, but also to the actual projects developed on the ground in countries like Papua New Guinea. And it is hard to think of something more sustainable on the long run than investing in education. We talked about this issue with Albert Schramm, the former Vice-Chancellor at the University of Technology in Leh.
Now here we come to the what's called House Europa. There is actually a sign there that says House Europa. You might want to see that. The university had lost its capacity to do research, and it was very backward with IT. So the intervention of the European Union was to give the university this big IT building. And then, there is no research without a master's program. So they donated a male and a female dormitory for the master's and PhD students, which we are still using. So it was a very important and structural intervention, which allowed us then, 10, 15 years later, to have the largest postgraduate program in the country.
If you look at development cooperation with the European Union with third countries all over the world, the common denominator of interventions is education, but I would call it human capital development. That's why the European Union also, in Papua New Guinea, which is not an exception, was active on education from the early days of development cooperation. Currently, we focus on vocational education and training in order to cover the needs of the large number of young population who are unskilled or semi-skilled and their search for employment.
You see, our biggest problem is the unemployment of our young people, skilling of young people. That's our biggest national crisis right now. This is one area that the European Union can really assist us in.
We have to create employment, and the only way you're going to do that is through education and giving skills to the people in Papua New Guinea to get that economic activity that will stop them from becoming involved with the less likely enterprises such as stealing and criminal activities. We don't need 10,000 lawyers in Papua New Guinea. What we need is 10,000 carpenters and engineers that can build roads and supervise roads to develop infrastructure that will deliver health services and education facilities. And that's what Papua New Guinea is lacking.
Creating job opportunities is a real challenge in PNG. In fact, thousands of young Papua New Guineans enter the job market every year, and very few are actually able to find a place in the formal economy. I have discussed this issue with Michael Kingston, one of the most dynamic entrepreneurs from his company headquarters in Lae. Historically, Papua New Guinea is a country that has a huge problem when it comes to employment, but nobody really talks about it. Oh,
this is correct.
It's an argument that is not really tapped.
I 100% agree. I often say that I think unemployment is the single biggest problem that we have socially and economically in PNG. You would be hard pressed to get a formal unemployment figure, but my personal estimates is that it would be north of 50%.
North of 50%?
Absolutely. If you walk around, and particularly if you look at the younger demographic, the number of young people who are looking for jobs and can't get a job is enormous. One of my favourite lines is, we don't have a crime problem in PNG, we have an unemployment problem. My general rule of thumb is, for every one person who's employed, their income is going towards supporting another 10 people. So if we've created an additional 10,000 jobs through the fishing industry, that's supporting approximately 100,000 people.
The relations between Papua New Guinea and Europe are important, particularly because of the free trade agreement. And I think half the tuna that is consumed in Europe comes from Papua New Guinea. It's not as far away as many Europeans think.
Fish on the grill. Something pretty hard to resist, I must say. Especially when it comes straight from the ocean and it's cooked by a crew of fishermen who really know how to improvise a party. But the bulk of their catches is to be found somewhere else. In one of the many canneries now present along the north coast of PNG. Part of a multi-million-dollar industry that has attracted a string of fishing companies from all over Asia. As long as they process their catches on shore, they can access duty and quota-free the European market of 500 million consumers. An agreement that is not pleasing everybody on the other side of the ocean.
Papúa se convierte así en una gran plataforma de transformación y exportación de atún proveniente de los grandes competidores de la industria europea, es decir, Filipinas, Tailandia, China, Estados Unidos. Realmente ellos son los grandes beneficiarios del acuerdo. Se estima que la producción de atún se elevará finalmente a 400.000 toneladas al año, dirigidas al mercado europeo que consume actualmente un total de unas 710.000. El impacto será muy grave, ya que los precios del atún procedente de Papúa son un tercio más baratos que los europeos por los bajos salarios y los inexistentes estándares medioambientales.
When I was coming to Papua New Guinea in 2011, we had just signed it between the European Union and Papua New Guinea was the first ACP country altogether to ratify an economic partnership agreement. It's quite a strong linkage between Papua New Guinea and the European Union now, which is supposed to have economic benefits and also deepening our relations. But then the problem is, of course, the fish that is caught and processed. Is it in compliance with all the rules and regulations? Is it in compliance with a sustainable policy? The issue is that the youngsters of today living in Papua New Guinea, the kids of today's generation, they still want to see fish in the water also tomorrow for their own benefit.
necessary to appreciate that fishery resources are renewable under conditions. So the European Union, because of it is a big market, has the possibility to control to this extent the imports of whatever products in Europe, not only fisheries, are produced in a way that is sustainable. Therefore, we have the possibility to sanction eventually states which do not really abide by international standards in terms of catchments, in terms of reporting, in terms of controlling, in terms of regulating.
Today the Commission sends a stern warning to big fishing nations. We are talking about Philippines and Papua New Guinea, a yellow card. Our thorough analysis highlights that they are not acting sufficiently to fight illegal fishing.
Controlling illegal fishing activities is an expensive and complex exercise. But after an initial warning, the PNG government invested in human and capital resources to improve the traceability of the catch. Not an easy task, as explained by John Casu, the managing director of the National Fishing Authorities in Port Moresby.
So when that happened, we looked at all these areas, the various areas of reform. Initially, it starts with the observers. For every vessel that is fishing within the Western Central Pacific Ocean, at least one observer is present on the fishing boats. So they are the very start of the traceability. They record all the catches that do come on the vessels, which hull it goes into. They keep a track of that, and this information is then recorded on real time and then passed back to NFA. So we've got a command center that records all this information that is coming in.
But the job can be risky and far from providing all the answers. As Paul Barker, head of a local think tank, explains.
A Papua New Guinean inspector on board, it's a challenging and it's a dangerous job, because clearly if you're reporting, you're on the high seas, you're the only person speaking English, and you are starting to report that there are abuses happening, that they're not reporting their catch properly, they're catching illegal species. If you are reporting, you can be accidentally falling overboard, and there have been a number of cases of Papua New Guinean fisheries inspectors disappearing. It is a challenge. They need to be given all the technology that is available to communicate, to be able to press warning alarms, preferably, have a second inspector on board, because you can't both fall over accidentally at the same time.
Certainly there is no 100% compliance, but in a global world it's necessary that we act globally. It is necessary that we work with all partners to make sure that there is room and production and resources for the future generations.
PNG has really seized that opportunity and strengthened a lot of its regulations and legislation. When I left, in fact, the yellow flag had just been lifted or was about to be lifted. So Papua New Guinea's access to EU markets was no longer under any threat from unreported illegal or unrecorded fisheries.
We were given duty-free market access to the European Union. So many of our industries were started that create thousands and thousands of jobs, mainly for women and our young girls. And we are extremely grateful that the European Union has given us preferential market access that no other region or country in the world has given us. It's not about one-way trade. Please, I want to stress that point. We want more European investment in Papua New Guinea.
Tanneries have created thousands of jobs in this country. But the preferential trade agreement signed with the European Union was meant for all PNG products, not only fisheries, including, of course, agriculture and forestry, two sectors that could provide plenty of new opportunities into the future, especially if exploited in a sustainable manner.
The idea about this project started, I think, way before 2010. This was something that was drummed up by, I must say, not from Papua New Guinea, but all because of the issues on climate change. And because Papua New Guinea was one of those main countries that was pushing for this idea of reducing emissions from forestry.
Papua New Guinea forest is still unexplored. I'm not talking about the value of the logs, which is just a commercial value. I'm talking about the wealth of fauna and flora that exist under the canopy. It's something that is still unknown.
For this particular national forest inventory that we are doing, we are looking at the whole works, the biodiversity, the fauna, and we're not just concentrating on the commercial trees, we're looking down to as little as the grass this is on the ground here.
First thing we're trying to do is estimate carbon in the whole forest ecosystem. Soil is one of the 5 carbon pools. If we're able to manage our soil properly and contain all the carbon in here, there's more carbon being stored than lost. Some of the soils have very loose surface, so once you remove all the vegetation, the soil gets eroded and that's where all the nutrients go.
This is one of the value of NFI inventory, that it goes to all places in PNG, from the lowlands to high altitudes. So you have the lowland species, but then you have the high altitude species, you have species in the middle. So when you combine all this together, you get a hugely diverse local fauna and local flora. When you look at the number of species of plants in 100 times 100 kilometers square, then the square, including Mount Wilhelm, the country's highest peak, is one of the 7 most diverse areas in the world.
Mapping up the forest of Papua New Guinea is a monumental task, as the country hosts the 3rd largest rainforest in the world. Essentially, one of the lungs of the planet. Abe Hitofumi is the technical advisor for the project, and he believes that local knowledge and local practices should have a role in an otherwise very scientific exercise.
I worked in Samoa and Fiji. I had a good time. I love the people, I love the nature there, and I still love there. But as a forester, yeah, PNG forest is special. PNG National Forest Inventory is very unique and comprehensive. Other than trees and plants, we also have a component of zoological biodiversity. Here we're collecting the fruit flies, and we're also collecting ants, and we are also collecting the moths. So they are the very important pollinator and part of the tropical rainforest ecosystems. They give us some good indication of the status of the forest. Oh, Kibiro, come hurry up and help me.
This NFI project has given us this opportunity to go out into most of these areas that we were unable to go in to collect our specimens. And we keep the specimens. We keep the specimens for botanists, taxonomists, for the future generation.
We have such great collaboration. We can recruit people from the village, and they become biologists over the time, over the years, because they have this foundation which you can't really get very easily if you come from city environment, unless you are really deeply interested in biology. I would say Papua New Guinea is very important in terms of biodiversity. It has a potential to be very important in terms of biodiversity research, if only there were better schools and better funding for research.
This is also a tree, and it's a Polteria in the Sapotaceae family. The other one here is Hologrammis in Araceae family, and it's under Taro family. I think it's almost 20 years for me to be with the PNG Forest Research Institute. I'm a local guy and I know my knowledge of my plants. That's why when I came to a scientific environment, I already got up with scientific knowledge about the plants. My grandfather, they taught me about the medicinal plants and other things like fuel woods and building materials, food, and some of those things.
Passion for the forests is not new in Papua New Guinea, as countless of generations before have lived off the plants, animals and trees that were once in a pristine state. But unfortunately, years of commercial logging and commercial agriculture have left its toll in this country, as 24% of primary rainforest has been lost between 1972 and 2002 alone. At this point, knowing what sort of biodiversity is to be found in the rainforest of Papua New Guinea is not only a matter of national interest, but a global one instead, as humanity as a whole struggles in the battle against climate change, perhaps the biggest challenge of our time.
As we say, we're part of the same world. South Pacific is a crucial part. It's got one of the largest remaining natural rainforests, which plays a major part in climate management. If they get harvested, then you've got a major level of emissions occurring from this area. But in the meantime, it's a sink. And also to encourage reforestation and sustainable forestry activities.
I think the good news for all our European Union member states is the government has made a policy decision that by 2020 we will no longer allow any round log exports from Papua New Guinea. I think this is, for me, the first step we have taken as a nation now to sustainably use our forest resources. It must cease. That's the commitment the government has made and has told the world and has told the country. And as far as I'm concerned, there should be no more logging permits issued after the 31st of December this year. We don't need the revenue flows that has resulted in so much destruction to our forests.
Global problems require global solutions. And I hope that with this film, we are going to showcase that what Europe has done together with Papua New Guinea the last 40 years was meaningful and helped both sides on an equal way.
Si può fare, si può fare, si può prendere o lasciare, si può fare, puoi correre e volare, puoi cantare, puoi gridare, puoi vendere e comprare, puoi rubare e regalare, puoi piangere e ballare, si può fare, puoi prendere o lasciare, puoi volere, puoi lottare, fermarti e rinunciare, si può fare, puoi prendere o lasciare, si può crescere e cambiare, continuare a navigare. Si può fare, si può prendere o lasciare, si può fare, partire e ritornare, puoi tradire e conquistare, puoi dire e poi negare, puoi giocare, lavorare, odiare e poi amare, si può fare, puoi prendere o lasciare, puoi volere, puoi lottare, fermarti e rinunciare, si può fare, puoi prendere o lasciare, si può crescere e cambiare, continuare a navigare.